So what we're going to do here is go over solar and battery systems, how they can help community buildings, how they can bring your bills down, how they can help you with your decarbonisation efforts. Just to plug the Community Buildings Hub, if you just Google Community Buildings Hub DTA, you'll find the link to this. But there's quite a lot of materials on there, guides on insulation, how to calculate carbon and payback periods for different things that you might want to do in your buildings, information on grants that you might want to apply for, as well as some of the materials we'll be covering today on solar and battery system as well. So just looking at solar systems, what are the sort of questions we want to look at in this session? So how much does a solar system cost, and how much money will it save? Those are the first two basic questions we'll want to look at. If we what size building system should we install? And how do batteries fit into this picture as well? Solar is fairly easy to understand. Working out payback period for solar is fairly straightforward as well, and we will go through an example here. But what do batteries add to this? And then a little bit about how to make best use of solar, how to really optimize the solar and battery system that you might install in your property, as well as how EV charging could fit into this as well. And then we'll have a short Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or wait until the end and put your hand up, and I'll do my best to answer. So how much does a solar system cost? A good rule of thumb, what I tend to use when I'm helping community groups apply for grants, is about £1,250 per kilowatt peak. KWP means kilowatts peak. So if you have a 4 kWp system, when the sun is shining in the middle of summer, it'll produce 4 kilowatt hours, 4 kilowatts of electricity. If it's a cold winter's day and there's lots of cloud, it might only produce a few hundred watts. But P represents peak and the maximum amount of solar it'll generate on the sort of sunniest day of the year. So a 4 kilowatt peak system at a cost of 1,250 per kilowatt might cost us £5,000. But it's important to note that there's quite a lot of fixed costs involved in that. For example, if you're putting it up on a roof, the scaffold might form a large proportion of the cost of installing the solar on your community building. And so as the array size goes up, if the scaffold size remains the same, the actual price per kilowatt hour reduces, and it can reduce a fair bit. A 40 kilowatt system could cost as low as £40,000 at a price of £1,000 per kilowatt. And another sort of quite large factor in the cost of a solar system is the mounting system as well. Roof systems are always reasonably expensive because you need scaffolding, you might need to remove slates, there might need to be a roofer involved, and then the mounting kit to put it on the roof has a cost as well. Ground mount is usually the cheapest way of doing it, just because you don't need the scaffolding, and the actual kit to put it on the ground, it tends to be a lot smaller. The most expensive way of doing solar is solar car parking bays, because these tend to have to be reasonably large structures, quite often steel structures. They have to have particular wind loading so that they don't blow away when we have a gale. And those tend to sit on the more expensive end of the market. Just to give you an idea of what these might look like in practice, this is a 47 kilowatt peak system that I've just helped the community building in Barmouth install. Although this is a ground mount system, it is actually on the roof. They've got a flat roof, so perfect for a ground mount system. And you can see there are metal trays holding the solar panels in place, and then simple bricks acting as ballast to stop the solar panels blowing away in the wind. This is in a seaside location. And so we've had to slightly reduce the angle of the solar panels here just to stop them catching the wind quite so much, just because it's quite an exposed location. You might be able to sort of, have a slightly higher angle on those in a more sheltered area. A lower angle means you generate slightly less solar over the course of a year. But yeah, these are but by far the cheapest way of installing solar is on a ground mount system like this. The bricks are cheap. The aluminium profiles holding everything in place is reasonably cost effective as well. The solar panels create DC energy, so we need to convert that into AC to use them in our buildings. So this is a large inverter which converts DC to AC power that's located inside the building. These you can sometimes locate outside the building as well, but it's usually makes more sense to locate them inside, just so that they don't get damaged and they don't get exposed to the weather. And then next to it, there's a battery system as well. And then an example of a roof-mounted system. This is another solar system that's just gone in the past couple of months. This is in Nant Gwrtheyrn, the Welsh language centre on the Llyn Peninsula. And we essentially had, wherever we had free space, we fit in as many solar panels as we can. And we put in a reasonably large system here as well. Unfortunately, this isn't totally clear from the pictures, but those two red roof areas in the bottom two photos, we actually managed to find some red coloured solar panels to go on those roofs as well. It doesn't show that quite clearly in the picture, but it actually does make it look fantastic. They sort of match the colour of the roof quite well. You can also get solar panels in yellow and I think in turquoise, although probably not too many people have yellow or turquoise roofs. But if you do happen to have one, they are available in those colours as well. So how much money will solar save us? And that does depend really on the size of the system we put in and also how much energy you use at your property. So in this example, we've got a building and it uses 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy every month. In this example, they're paying 30 pence per kilowatt hour for the electricity. So the energy bills will be around about £300 per month. We'll put in a solar system that matches this demand. So the solar system will also generate, on average, 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. So the demand, the amount we use in the building is 1,000 kilowatts, and what we generate is also 1,000 kilowatts. Does this mean that you'll owe the energy company nothing at the end of the month? Well, it would be great if that was the case, but unfortunately, it isn't. In general, unless you're really lucky that you have a building that's exclusively used during daytime hours, you probably will have some electricity usage, after the sun's gone down. So let's say you use 600 kilowatt hours during daylight hours and 400 kilowatts overnight. The solar will only be generating its 1,000 kilowatt hours during the day, when the sun is out. If you're lucky, then you might reduce your daily consumption in this example by 600 kilowatt hours. So what this means in terms of savings is that you'll save £180 per month in this particular example. 600 kilowatts times 30 pence per kilowatt. This is how much your energy bills will come down from having a solar system that's matched quite closely to the demand of your property. What happens to the excess solar, the solar that you don't use during the day? Well, one thing you can do is to sell this back to the grid, but you will get a lot less back for it than compared to what you're paying for energy. In this example, they were paying 30 pence for energy they were pulling from the grid. They might get 5 or 6 pence per kilowatt for energy they're selling back to the grid. This can vary. Some suppliers do pay more, and I will have an example of later in the presentation of finding a supplier that pays slightly more and making full use of that. But if you are getting 5 pence per kilowatt, you'll make another £20 per month by selling that energy back to the grid. So your bills have come down now from £300 a month to £100 a month. So a £200 saving. So we've saved 2/3 of our electricity bill by matching supply and demand fairly closely. But this is just an example of 1 month in the year. What we also have to consider is that the solar system is going to generate a lot more power in the summer compared to the winter. So in the winter months, in December and January, it's going to produce relatively little solar electricity. If the demand in the building is constant through the year, what this means is that only a small fraction of your electricity use will be provided in the winter. And then in the summer, maybe you'll only be using a small fraction of the electricity that you generate. So we can average this out over a year. But what it generally means is you want to be selling that excess energy to the grid in the summer, saving that money, and then using it to go towards your bills in the winter when the solar isn't producing quite as much electricity. So what size system should we install? Maybe you're all convinced we definitely want a solar system. How big or how small should we make our solar system? And the answer is it really, really does depend. Slightly controversial view, but if you can get a grant to pay for it, go as big as you possibly can. And I'll explain why in a moment. But if you can't get a grant and you're paying for it yourself, you really do want to consider your return on investment and making sure that that solar system pays for itself as quickly as possible, so that you can recoup the money that you've invested in the system. So if you can get a grant, every kilowatt hour you generate and don't use and sell to the grid, you will get something back for it. And yes, maybe 5 pence per kilowatt hour isn't much, but essentially it is free money. A grant has paid for this. Even if you're making 20, 50, 100 pounds a month from selling energy back to the grid, that's 20, 50 or 100 pounds a month you wouldn't be getting if you hadn't installed that size of system. But there are limits to this. You have to convince the grant people to give you the money. And so you do have to be realistic. If you have a tiny building with a tiny amount of consumption and you ask for an absolutely massive amount of money to put in a huge solar array, the grant people won't give you the money, and rightly so. So a better tactic is to really think about how large can you go, but still keep the payback period of the solar reasonably good. Try to keep the payback period back under 10 years if you possibly can. What this means is if you have an energy spend of £1,000 a year and you're making a saving of £100, if your solar system costs you £10,000 a year to put in and you're saving £1,000 a year off of your energy bill, it will pay for itself within 10 years. So try to make sure that those figures match up. And the best way of doing this is you'll need a quote anyway to apply for the grant. Ask the solar installer to make sure that the payback period is within that sort of 10-year period. That's usually a good sort of sweet spot when you're applying for grants, is to keep it within that. If you're paying for them yourselves, you want to really maximize your usage of the electricity, because every kilowatt hour that you use yourself, you save 30 pence per kilowatt hour. Every unit you sell to the grid, you're only getting 5 pence per kilowatt hour back for it. So you want to try and keep your array size, or your annual generation, reasonably close to what your actual demand is. So if your annual consumption is 10,000 kilowatt hours, try to go for a system that will generate 8 to 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, so that you're matching supply and demand reasonably closely. This should give you the best payback period for the solar system. And they can be 5 or 6 years in absolutely optimal systems. You'll make your money back within 5 or 6 years. Do keep one thing in mind. You might have a community building and you might have plans to maybe change your heating system. Maybe today you've got a gas boiler and your long-term ambition is maybe to put in an air source heat pump or some other form of electrified heating. Do remember that that's going to add to your long-term electrical demand at the site. Maybe use 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, and maybe if you put in a heat pump, that would go up to 15 or even 20,000 kilowatt hours. You might then be able to convince a grant funding person to give you a slightly larger array because you have a long-term aim to put in a heat pump or the form of electrified heating. In those two previous examples I gave you, this one in Barmouth, we put in a 47 kilowatt solar array. This will generate 50,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, just because of the particular orientation of the panels. Their annual electricity usage is 40,000 kilowatt hours per year. So it's slightly over, and I'll go into why we did that in a later section of this presentation. But it's a reasonable match. We didn't ask for a 100,000 kilowatt hour system for a 40,000 kilowatt hour property. It's in the same sort of ballpark. And then the second example from Nant Gwrtheyrn, we filled every single roof we possibly could with solar. There's quite a lot of listed buildings there where we couldn't install solar. Their annual energy demand, including their gas usage, is about 500,000 kilowatt hours a year. This solar system will generate 80,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So it's way under what we could have put on the site, but we didn't have any more roof. This was the largest system we could install. They are putting in planning applications to put some ground mount solar to add to this. Then hopefully they can get another grant in the future to add that. That might help with some of that shortfall. So that's the solar side reasonably covered. How do batteries help us in our systems? It's quite often when I go to talk to groups about solar and batteries, they might view batteries in the wrong way. Quite often there's a misconception that you can generate loads of solar in the summer, store it in batteries, and then use it in the winter. It would be great if that was the case, but unfortunately it isn't. We should think instead of batteries as short-term electricity storage. So if you're generating 40 kilowatt hours during a day, you're using 20 kilowatt hours in the property, you might have a 10 kilowatt battery that you then fill with some of that excess solar. The remaining 10 you might sell back to the grid. And then overnight, as soon as the sun goes down, the building starts throwing that electricity down. And at some point, the battery's going to be empty, and then it'll start pulling electricity from the grid again. In this example, 33.3 kilowatts of electricity used during the day. 20 kilowatts would come from solar that's used as it's being generated. 10 kilowatts stored in a battery system, and then 3.3 kilowatt hours then bought from the grid. If we compare that to our previous example, instead of saving £200 a year with a battery, you would now be saving £270, per month, not per year. So the batteries actually saved us an extra £70 a month compared to the previous example. But batteries are quite expensive. A 10 kilowatt battery might cost you, 7,000, maybe slightly less. And so if it's only actually saving us £70 per month, it's going to take us, 12 to 15 years to actually pay for that battery, even under absolutely ideal conditions where we fill the battery with solar power every single day and then discharge all of it every single day. But the truth is there's going to be some months when you're not generating enough solar to fill that battery with solar. So the payback period is probably going to be higher than that, probably more than 15 years. It's not untypical. What does this actually mean in practice? Again, if a grant is paying for the battery, the payback period doesn't really matter so much as long as the grant people are happy that the battery provides value for money. If you are paying for it yourself, do be careful that you are actually going to make enough money on the battery that it'll pay for itself within a reasonable amount of time. Most batteries come with 10 to 12 year warranties. If there's a 15-year payback period and the battery dies after 13 years, it does mean you haven't fully recouped your investment in that battery. Yeah, batteries work well if there's a grant to pay for it. If there isn't, really do question some of the figures that the solar and battery installers will give you to make sure that it's providing you with value for money. There are a few other advantages of batteries as well. One would be battery backup. This isn't a standard feature, and I've yet to find a grant that will actually pay for the battery backup equipment. But for some places that maybe deal with vulnerable people and maybe in an area where the electricity does go down from time to time, it might be worth considering putting in a battery backup system so that when the electricity from the grid goes down, you still have some electrical energy stored in batteries that you can use to keep the property going. The other thing you can do with batteries is you can buy off-peak power during the winter months and use these during the day as well. So that can also save you a little bit of additional money in the summer rather than just charging it from solar and then using it at night. You might charge it overnight on cheaper electricity and then use it during the day to supplement the solar that you'll be generating. And some electricity suppliers are already considering offering special plans for groups with batteries, so that the battery can be set up in a special way to stop you using peak rate electricity. And they might offer you even better electricity rates if you were to set up your battery in this way. So that's how solar works. That's how the solar payback works. And we sort of have a slightly better understanding now of how batteries work as well. How do we make optimal use, though, of our solar and battery system? So this is a very simple example, not too dissimilar to one we had there. A small community centre, £1,500 a year in energy bills, which translates to an annual electricity use of 5,000 kilowatt hours. They install a system that can generate 5,600 kilowatts, so they're matching supply and demand reasonably well. They use 60% of the power that they generate themselves. This would save us £1,000 per year, which would reduce their electricity bills down to £500. And if you also sold any excess, so the other 40% that you're not consuming yourself back to the grid, you'll earn an additional £110. So it will reduce your bills down to £390 per year, which is a significant saving. I'm sure most of our community groups would love to make savings in this ballpark. And that's fairly typical. That's a decent-sized solar system, well-sized, reasonably cost-effective to put in. There's lots of grants that also will give you enough money to install a system such as this. But this isn't particularly optimized, but it's still saving a significant amount of money. I'm going to give you now another example, and it's going to be this property that I've just helped with in Barmouth. This is a real-world situation. The solar array's only just gone on, so I'm only going to give you modelled figures for what their actual savings will be. If I do another presentation in a year's time, I'll tell you if they were correct or not. But yeah, hopefully they'll be there or thereabouts. This customer has annual bills of £10,000 per year, an annual electricity use of approximately 40,000 kilowatt hours. It's actually a large warehouse that's been subdivided into different units. There's a food bank upstairs. There's a community space upstairs that's rented out to community groups. There's a nursery and a church and a bookshop in the downstairs area. There's no gas in the building, so everything is electricity, the heating, the cooking, the lighting, everything. And so we installed a 47 kilowatt solar array and a 48 kilowatt battery system on this property. The estimated annual generation for this system is 50,000 kilowatt hours per year. The peak generation is in July, where they'll be producing 230 kilowatt hours per day, and the lowest generation month will be December, when they only produce 41 kilowatt hours per day. And daily demand is fairly constant through the year. It's slightly higher in the winter because of the electric storage heaters, and slightly lower in the summer months when less activities happen in the church and the community space. But daily demand on average over the course of the year is about 110 kilowatt hours per day. Originally, this building had separate meters for every single one of those different units. What we can see here in the top left is Scottish Power and a local electrician removing all of those electricity meters and consolidating them on one large three-phase meter. The reason we did that is because you have to connect your solar to a meter. So if we had connected the solar maybe to the nursery meter, none of the other units in the building would have benefited from the solar. The solar power we were generating would have gone through the nursery meter into the grid. We would be getting 5 pence per kilowatt hour, possibly, for that solar. And then the other units would be coming straight back in through the other meters where they'd be charged 30 pence per kilowatt hour for that exact same electricity. So we consolidated all of them down onto one meter, and then we gave them each a sort of, and that's the image in the bottom here, one large electricity cabinet coming in, and then separate cabinets for each of the units with energy monitoring devices so that we know how much electricity each individual unit works. So we're essentially going to split the bill between all the other units based on how much electricity they use. This is a day a couple of weeks ago during that sunny weather we had. They generated 232 kilowatt hours of solar. The building actually used 87 kilowatts. 40 kilowatts of it came from the battery, which actually is solar power that's been stored for different parts, to a different part of the day. And 26 kilowatt hour came in from the grid. That grid amount will come down. The battery is still in sort of a learning mode, so it knows how to best make use of the battery power. But yeah, that should be reduced significantly as this system runs for longer and longer. So if we just offset electricity use, just based on the usage profile of this building, the fact that quite a lot of events happen in the building in the evening, the fact that they've got lots of refrigerators in the food bank, which run 24 hours a day, we'd probably utilize 40% of the solar power that they would generate, which would mean a £6,000 a year energy saving off of their bill. Plus an additional £1,000 or so from selling energy back to the grid as well. So a saving of £7,000 a year off the original bill of £10,000, which would be a 70% reduction in costs. But we didn't want to settle for that. We thought we could do better. So what we did is we actually optimized how we used electricity in the building and where we sell and buy our electricity from. So what we did instead is the food bank has an electric vehicle that they use to deliver electricity. This allows us to sign up for the Intelligent Octopus Go electricity tariff. It's a special EV tariff, which gives you electricity between 11:30 and 5:30 for 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour. And we can also sign up for the Octopus outgoing tariff and sell electricity back to the grid for 12 pence per kilowatt hour. So what we're going to do, we haven't quite got there yet because we're still putting all of the energy contracts in place to do this, is we're going to fill the battery every night, even in the middle of summer, for 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour. And then during the day, sell all the solar we can back to the electricity company for 12 pence per kilowatt hour, which means we're even on the energy in the battery, we're saving 5 pence per kilowatt hour. And then in the winter, we'll also set their storage heaters to charge overnight between that 11:30 and 5:30 window for 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour. The EV charging will also happen in that same charging window as well. So in the worst winter days, we'll be getting 48 kilowatts from the battery, for which we'll be paying 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour, 41 kilowatts from the solar, for which we'll be paying nothing, and 61 kilowatt hours from purchasing in from the grid. So the previous winter cost on the worst day of the year would have been £37.50 per day, but the new price on the worst day of the year by doing this will be £18.56 per day. The previous summer running cost was about £15 per day. The new summer cost from essentially selling energy back to the grid would be a profit of £20.40 per day. What this looks like is a very, very complicated Excel spreadsheet, which I wouldn't recommend anyone do. This took me hours to work out. But what the end result of this spreadsheet is that this particular community group, which has particularly favourable winds behind it, I'm not suggesting everyone can do this, will make a profit of £1,475 a year on their energy. So that's not a saving of 1,000, that's an actual profit from selling energy back to the grid every year. Like I said, not everybody can sort of make the system work like this. They've got an EV, which allows them to use an EV tariff. They got a very large grant to put a very large solar and battery system in. But it does show what's possible by optimizing the tariffs and how you use your energy and how you fill your battery. We went from a standard £7,000 per year saving to essentially an £11,475 a year saving just by changing tariffs and then changing how we charge the battery. The final part of the puzzle of this is EV charging as well. EV charging can actually cause some headaches with a solar and battery system, and particularly if the charging system isn't well matched to the battery and solar system. What can happen is that the EV charging will be, the people using the EV will come, they'll plug in during the day. Maybe you're only just producing enough solar to cover the costs of that building. Now you're actually pulling energy from the building into the EV, and you're draining the batteries that you've got in the building instead of using solar power or instead of using grid electricity. EV batteries can be very large, sometimes as large as 100 kilowatt hours, and they can drain the battery systems fairly quickly. The best way I personally have found to work with this is to try and make sure that the solar inverter, the solar battery, and the EV charging is the same make, and that they can communicate together and work together in unison. The EV charger then knows, that we're not generating so much solar today, so I'll charge at a slower rate, or I'm generating lots of solar today, I'll charge at a faster rate. And it'll also know not to drain the battery. So it might send a signal to the battery to say, don't drain now, we want to save that for peak electricity usage. So they'll pull in energy from the grid to charge up that EV as well. You can also program some EVs and some EV chargers to only charge during that 11:30 to 5:30 window to make use of that 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour electricity as well. But yeah, making sure that you've got all those pieces to work together can be an important part of the puzzle as well. But if you've got it set up correctly, what it does mean is you could sell some of that solar to somebody who wants to charge up their solar vehicle. Maybe in those summer months in Barmouth when they've got an absolute, massive amount of excess solar, instead of getting 5 pence per kilowatt hour for it, or maybe 12 pence on the Octopus outgoing tariff, they could potentially get 40 to 60 pence per kilowatt hour by selling it to someone who wants to charge their electric vehicles. But it won't work everywhere, right? If you've got a little community building in the middle of nowhere with no facilities, it's highly unlikely that anyone will want to stop there for a few hours to charge up their vehicle. This can work well where you've got maybe a community pub or a community cafe, a location where people want to stop, maybe have a cup of tea, maybe have a meal, maybe next to a beach where they might want to spend a few hours. That tends to be the sort of locations this can work. So in the previous example in Nant Gwrtheyrn, it's the Welsh Language Centre. People tend to go there for the week. Quite a lot of civil servants from Cardiff who want to learn Welsh might travel up in their EVs, get there, the battery's almost empty, they're there for a whole week. They can just plug it in and slowly charge off solar power over the course of the week. And the community, the charity will will sell that energy to them for 40 to 60 pence per kilowatt hour. That's pretty much all I've got in my presentation. Hopefully that's been helpful to you. Do we have any questions? I'm quite sort of interested if are people considering solar? Are people considering batteries? Have people got solar and batteries and they won't make better use of it? Yeah. What questions have you got about your community building?
But there are a few comments and questions in the chat. Don't know if you've seen them.
Yeah, I'm just opening that up now. Thanks. So Barmouth system, that was a 47 kilowatt solar array. The grant was for a 12 kilowatt battery, and the cost for both was £56,000. During the project, they identified some other funds from elsewhere, and the solar installer was quite taken by the work that the building was doing, the food bank and so on and so forth. And he very graciously donated another 12 kilowatt battery as part of that. And we managed to actually bump that up to 48 kilowatts. But the grant part was for the original 12 kilowatt battery plus the 47 kilowatt array, and it was £56,000. But do bear in mind with Barmouth, their energy usage was really high. 40,000 kilowatt hours a year is a reasonable amount. So yeah, that system matched their demand very well. If you've got a small community centre, I wouldn't necessarily rush to find a £56,000 grant to put in the same thing, but it does give you an idea of what's possible. Nigel, I think you had your hand up there.
Yes, I'm involved in a community venture where we're in the process of building a new shop. So how do we calculate our requirement to be able to work out what solar panels we need and the payback?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because your building isn't going at the moment, is it? So you haven't got any bills to sort of check back on. Yeah, that's a really good question. You could, I don't know if you know of any other community ventures with a similar setup. You could potentially approach them and ask if they can have a look at their bills.
It is an existing shop, but in
yeah.
an old building
Yeah.
where our usage is likely to be totally different.
Yeah. So trying to identify a similar building would be one avenue. You could get someone in to actually calculate it for you. So you might tell them we're going to have 4 large fridge freezers. We're going to have, an electric stove. Maybe we're going to have a heat pump. This is going to be the predicted EPC of the building if it's a new building. That should give you some idea of what the annual consumption of your heating system will be. So there's a way to work it out, but it's not easy. It's a particular skill set to do that. You could look at your existing buildings and you could guesstimate it. You're probably going to, if it's going to be a similar size building, you might have the same number of refrigerators. Maybe you're changing a heating system from an oil boiler to a heat pump because it's a new building. So that would actually add to your electricity use, not reduce it. So you could sort of take your current figures and add a reasonable sum to it. But yeah, it's not an easy one. You could potentially consider waiting, running for a year and then seeing. But probably if you can get a grant to build a building, you want to put the solar on at the same time, right? Yeah.
One other question you mentioned in that presentation there, the various costs, but I didn't notice, did you put in the cost of installing an EV charging point?
I didn't put that in, no, that's a good point. Again, it depends on the speed of the charging point. You can buy reasonably slow 7 kilowatt chargers now for £700 or £800, maybe £1,000 to 1,200 fitted, depending on how much electricity cable you need to get from the meter to where the car is. The ones we put in Anscourt Thane are sort of twin 22 kilowatt systems. They cost significantly more, probably in the region of about £5,000 to £10,000, depending on distance from where the meter is. And then a rapid charger, 50 kilowatts up, you're talking £50,000 up for those. So yeah, it really does depend on speed and what you want to do. If you want to sell it to people, and a slow charger will work if people are going to be there for a few hours. If they're just popping into the shop, they're not going to bother plugging into a slow charger. But a rapid charger is quite expensive. And it's, making money off a rapid charger is not easy. Large corporations running EV chargers are sort of not doing a great job of doing that at the moment. The 22 kilowatts can be sort of a nice middle road. Where it would work best for something like a community shop is if you had a delivery van that was also going to be electric, and so you need electricity for that, then it might work better. Or if you want to make it available to staff, maybe. But yeah, does that help, or is that more
Yeah, it
confusion?
does. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Great. I'll move on to the next question, if that's okay. Are they always rectangular shapes? Yes, in general they are. You can get little slate-sized ones, so that you can actually put them into a roof like slates. They're quite expensive. With solar panels, the reason why they're so cheap to install is because of mass production, and so they're all that rectangular 2 meters by 1 meters sort of size. If you want something different, they'll be a lot more expensive. So I would say if you can make it work with a rectangular shape, much better. If you've got a particular reason why you can't, maybe a listed building, and you want to try and putting in the solar slates, it will cost significantly more to install. What grants are available? If you go to the website that I showed at the beginning of the presentation, the Community Buildings Hub, if you just Google Community Buildings Hub DTA Wales, you'll find it fairly easily. I think in the second section, the sort of intermediate level, there's a document in there which lists a whole bunch of different grants that are available for community groups. For community councils, have a look at that list and see which ones apply. Like the Welsh Government Community Assets Fund, I think is open to community councils. Quite a few of the other ones will be as well. It depends on the composition of your group, really, which grants are applicable. Use that as a starting point. Gwynedd Council also have a communities officer that help people find grants for their community buildings. If your council has such a person, they're also usually a fount of knowledge, and they can also help point you at some good grants as well. Hopefully that's helpful. Nigel Callahan, got similar requirements to Barmouth? Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure they'd love for you to come and have a look, Nigel. I think I did your energy report, I think. So you should have my email address. But if not, I'm pretty sure I still have yours and I can reach out to you. So if you send me an email, I can definitely help set up a meeting for you.
Lovely.
No problem. But do bear in mind, theirs is a flat roof system. I don't think you've got flat roof in Cletchur, but hopefully, helping sort of see the economics of theirs could help you with your system.
Ours is actually quite interesting. We've had someone who really knows what they're talking about, who worked in renewable energy for years, has done a sort of the maximum option version. And that actually uses some of the flat roof we've got at the back of the building.
Perfect.
It won't be as effective in terms of usage, but it's still actually worth fitting because it'd be running at about 70% efficiency. So it'll be very interesting to see how Barmouth have fitted all the different bits together. So it's almost exactly the same total requirements as we have. So that would be good.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, more than happy to help set that up, definitely. One thing I've just realized I didn't put in the presentation, which I really should have done, is when you put a solar system on a building, you do have a maximum amount that you can export to the grid. It's 3.7 kilowatts for a single phase system. It's 11 kilowatts for a 3-phase system. But you can ask the grid to export more. And in Barmouth, they allowed us to export 50 kilowatt hours of electricity. So do make sure that you talk to the DNO. In North Wales, it's Scottish Powered Energy Networks. In South Wales, National Grid Power Delivery, I believe. Make sure you do talk to them about your project. Usually your solar installer will do this on your behalf to make sure that they'll give you the capacity you need to sell the excess solar back to the grid as well. Can you recommend a good electricity supplier broker? We're in a community and visitor centres with 21 kilowatts of solar, all electric, so high energy use. There is DTA Wales I'm not sure, Matt, maybe you can jump in here, an energy brokerage service, but I do believe they're in the process of sort of re-looking at that again.
Yes, they're still in the process of that, I think, yeah. Yeah, so I guess watch this space.
Yeah, thank you. And you can also, there are online comparison websites. They are harder to use for community groups. They tend to want you to sort of submit a request, and then you wait, and then you hear back, and then someone phones you and tries to sell you a service. It's not quite as streamlined as it is for residential, unfortunately. But yeah, we do keep an eye on for the DTA one. That should be some more information about that shortly. I know it's something that we're working on. Other than that, I'm not sure. Is the honest answer. Aberangell Village Hall. Hello, hi. Thank you for joining. Do you actually have to own an EV to get the cheap Octopus rate? Yes, you do. Yes, you do, unfortunately. In Barmouth, they had an EV. The food bank already had their own EV that they used to do food deliveries. If you don't own an EV, you would need to buy one to get one, to get on that particular tariff. Now, second-hand EVs, you can get them reasonably cheaply. So you just have to then do the maths. How much money would we save charging up the battery off that 6.9 pence per kilowatt hour rate every night? How much would we make by selling at 12 pence per kilowatt off that particular supply contract? Can we afford £1,500 to £2,000 for a really, really old Nissan Leaf? Possibly not. Or if you've got a member of the community who's maybe involved in your community thing that has two EVs. I have two EVs because my wife has one and I need one for my work as well. They might be able to lend you essentially their EV in exchange for some free charging. So there's ways around this, but yes, you do need to register a number plate with Octopus Energy to make use of that special EV rate. Rebecca, I notice you have your hand up as well. Sorry, I didn't notice that till just now.
Right. So I'm a vicar and I look after several churches, and one of which we are looking at converting sort of into community space. And part of that, we're looking to go to electric heating, three-phase system, and using solar charging. So we've got it's a rural church, but it has a car park, which has probably got room for sort of, I suppose it's all about the length of 10 cars. I suppose we've only been looking at that. It has a bank along the back that we were thinking we could just put solar panels onto the bank at the back. Yep. Do you think it would be better to put in like sort of car ports, or just to stick with that kind of bank system?
Yeah. It depends how many solar panels you can get in. Like if you can get one up against the bank, one next to each other all the way across, and you've got 10 meters, that means you can get 10 solar panels in. In the same space on car parking bays, you might be able to get 2 or 3, in a line, and then 10 across in the same space. So it does mean you double or triple the amount of solar you could potentially put. Where it gets complicated is as I mentioned already, ground mount solar is quite expensive to install. And then the payback period goes up. And as soon as it ticks over that sort of 10-year payback period, grant people aren't quite as happy to fund it after that. So it does depend. It depends on the particular ground mount system. the best thing to do is to ask for a quote and see what comes back from the installer. And if the payback period is under 10 years, apply for some grants. If you're not successful, you can always try for a smaller grant for the smaller system up against the bank as well. You do have to also remember, you could put a humongous system in. If it doesn't match the demand in the property, it's going to be too big anyway, and the payback period is not going to be great. So I guess if you're putting in new electrified heating, that will help to a certain degree. The three-phase system, I'm assuming, is for the electrified heating as well, so that'll help you sell more to the grid. But yeah, I think usually the solar installers will look at your consumption. So you could tell them we're also thinking about putting electric heating in, so please increase that a little bit, and they should be able to give you some guidance about what size system. So if they come back and say 10 panels, 20 panels and you can fit that on the bank, that's the optimal way of doing it. If they say no, you're a good match here for a much larger system, and we can bring that payback period under 10 years, and the grants agency is willing to fund it, that would be a really, really nice system. Yeah. The other advantage of the car bays is, people coming into the building when it's raining outside, they can back up their car. They can sort of, walk most of the way into the building undercover. And you can also sometimes, with some of the parking bay, integrate EV charging into them directly as well. So yeah. Thanks for the question. Do we have any other questions? Can't see any in the chat. Okay. Hi, John.
Hello, Elvis. Thank you. Just a minute.
If there's lots of feedback, you can type it in and I'll answer it in the chat, but do try and talk if you can.
Slightly negative question, Elvid. Based on what we know so far, are solar panels potential targets for theft, be they roof-mounted or freestanding panels? And if so, what might that do to insurance costs?
Yeah, indeed. Both those two examples I've just given you, the one in Barmouth and the one in Nantgwrtheuyn, they were both Ynni Cymru grants. And part of the terms and conditions of the funding was that we had to insure the panels ahead of time. So I guess they've already got one eye on that. I've certainly never heard of solar panels being stolen. The actual individual panels aren't worth a massive amount. I mean, they're worth something, obviously. Otherwise, we would. But most of the cost is in the installation, it's in the cabling, it's in the inverter, and the battery. The solar panels themselves are reasonably cheap, and they're quite big and bulky. And if they're up on someone's roof, then they have to be a very speedy thief to erect the scaffolding, jump up there, rip all the solar panels off the roof. The inverter is much more of a target for theft, really. And I usually say install it in the building. You can install it outside. They're usually weatherproof, or a good proportion of them are. But I usually recommend to install them inside specifically for that reason. Now, what might happen if energy prices keep going up and the cost of solar panels ticks up as well? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I'd be a lot less worried about a roof-mounted system compared to a ground-mounted system. But having said that, I've yet to hear of a ground-mount system, people coming in nicking the solar panels. So let's hope it stays that way. Interestingly, that example in Barmouth, although it was a ground-mounted system, it was still up on the roof, and it's 3 stories up. I would imagine that's reasonably safe from theft there. But yeah, it's a good point. Thanks for the question. Great. Do we have any more questions, or shall I hand back to Holly?
Can I ask a question?
Of course. Yeah,
Quick
of
one.
course, Nick.
Just wondered what your thoughts are on the newly legal plug-in solar domestic setups, and how you think that might affect the professional installation market.
Yeah, I think they're a reasonable, they're a very positive development. Essentially, it's a solar panel with an inverter combined, and then it has a plug. So it just outputs AC power. So you just plug it into any socket in your house, and then it feeds the electricity back into your house. The sort of systems we're talking about here for community groups, 10, 20, 40, even 70 or 80 kilowatt systems, that would be an 80 kilowatt system would probably be 200 solar panels. That's a lot of plugs to plug in. So I think in that sort of scale, you definitely need a bigger system with its own dedicated inverter. But if I had a little flat and I didn't own the roof, and I can buy one of those solar panels, maybe put it out on a balcony on a summer's day, plug it in and generate some of my own electricity. Yeah, fantastic solution. Also great sort of mobile power as well. If you've got a particular application where you've got a village fete or something, and you just take the solar panels out and you can plug it in. There needs to be some earthing things there. But it's that might be another use case for that if you've got the right sort of equipment to make that work. But yeah, for very small scale, 1 or 2 panels, they're great little systems, but probably not a great match for community buildings. And just referring back to John's question about theft, much more easy for someone to come with a pair of snips and walk away with that. I think they're a really positive development, particularly for people living in flats or who don't have their own roofs.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking for small businesses that might not actually be eligible for grants in the way that community groups are. They're still pretty affordable systems if it's actually worth the bother of doing it.
Obviously, we should look at the cost of it. It should have some guidance as to how much electricity it's going to generate in a year. Multiply that by £30 per kilowatt or whatever it is you're paying, and then you should be able to work out if it'll pay back reasonably quickly. I'm a fan. I think it's a good development.
Okay, great, thanks.